Cory with the Project Advantage podcast, where we bring contractors and distributors the insights they need to succeed. Today we have Forrest Flagger with us, CEO and co-founder of Parspec, an AI-powered product selection, quoting, and submittals platform for distributors and sales agents. Forrest, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Cory. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you and I have spent some time, talking about the system already. For the audience, what was the problem that you and the team were really setting out to solve when you came up with and started developing Parspec?
Yeah, interesting journey. I started my career on the design side as an architect and engineer, working on energy efficiency, sustainable projects. And we were interested in using computing to basically explore many different design options to try to come up with like very energy efficient designs. And one of the challenges we always had in doing that work was just getting information about products. So at that time, I was a researcher at Stanford. I had a small research lab, and one of my graduate students, who is now the co-founder and CTO of Parspec, had a concept of basically leveraging AI to take publicly facing data about products hosted on, spec sheets or warranty docs, and extract that to make it searchable at scale. And so that was sort of the genesis of the company, was to service the design community. Although now Parspec is focused primarily on sales agents and distributors, and I can jump into that in a little bit more detail in terms of how we got there. But
yeah, that seems like a big pivot in terms of the focus area. Though the distributors certainly and sales agents certainly can utilize such a technology.
Yeah, I mean, the decision to go there, and I spent some time working for like a vertically integrated company that was acting as a contractor and buying directly from distribution, was in order to make a good decision for product selection, you also need to know things like lead time and cost. And it's really, the agent and distributor that have that data. So we figured the product would have the most value serving that market and bringing sort of technical specifications to the distributor, but also enabling them to leverage the cost and lead time data that they have at scale to inform the product selection and quoting process.
Gotcha. And so when we're thinking about, that bidding process, the time spent in it, the cost of it, what sort of savings, when you look at your data, can a distributor or sales agent really find when making a switch to a more digital platform than maybe a more manual platform that they've been used to?
Yeah, it's a great question. We did a little bit of research just in how much time is spent in sort of the traditional process, right? And we found that the average time per quote that a distributor or agent takes to prepare a quote, in terms of active time, like working on that product, is usually 2 to 3 hours. And with like industry standard win rates of 10 to 20%, if you factor in the submittal part of it, you end up with sort of 30 plus labor hours per one project, just working on, bidding and associated submittals. And that's, quite a bit of time when you look at like an average order values that's just over six figures. I mean, for most distributors, it's about 10% of the gross margin, right, is spent just in labor in that part of the workflow. So if you zoom out a bit and compare that to other industries outside of construction, you're at about half that in terms of labor. And I don't know if that's entirely like a technology problem. I think it has to do with just the unique challenges of matching products through or requirements to products, right? Just with the complexity of parsing through drawings and specifications, that makes it kind of a uniquely challenging and labor intensive workflow.
So a lot of software is, as you and I know, is really a cost center, and we, rationalize having these having these costs in different ways in a business. But it sort of sounds like the type of software we're talking about here actually could really be a revenue center if utilized correctly.
Yeah, I mean that's the value that most of our customers see in the offering. I mean it varies because we have a quoting solution and a submittal solution. So on the quoting side, we're seeing time reductions of 30 to 50% in terms of active time to prepare a quote, and the time savings there is really around basically automating the generation of the bill of materials. So the user just has to upload the drawings and spec, and we're able to identify the relevant items out of the product schedules that are hosted in those drawings and the associated technical requirements. And so there's a time saving up front of just understanding what is being asked for and required for this project. And then the second time saving is identifying what products in the market satisfy those requirements. And that's where we're crawling, I think, about 4,000 different manufacturers today and indexing their product catalogs and able to identify automatically what are the set of products, right, that meet that specification. But the value that our customers are seeing is not just like the cost savings of being more efficient in the quoting process. It's that they feel if they're able to return a quote back to the customer faster, that will increase their hit percentage. And there's another element of this, which is often, as you know, many products like meet the technical requirements. And so we help the distributor in this case, like understand what compliant products are in inventory or where they have like rebates or other incentives. So it can help them make more informed decisions about what might be a more profitable product to supply or a product that might better meet the requirements. And also looking at things like what is that specifier approved before, or what is that contractor purchased before. All of that data is really, it's data points at the specifier that we're surfacing to the quoter, and they can use that information to make better decisions around what's most likely to win, right, for that project.
So how does that look? So I sort of in my head I'm imagining on the interface I'm looking and I'm going to build a quote, and the system's basically suggesting based on the spec what the best solutions could be for that particular spec, or can you walk us through a little about how that works in practice?
Yeah, so once the requirements for that BOM line item are defined, they see a carousel of different options. Every item in the carousel meets the technical specification, and then those items are ranked based on what is that customer purchased before, what's in inventory, where are their rebates, right? And so we're trying to provide a best estimate of what we think is the best product to quote. Ultimately, the quoter is picking from those options to choose what they want to quote to the customer.
So in my world, I spend a lot of time in and around website testing, sales ops testing, experimentation. And so what you're talking about, aligns with that so well, because I think it's the more data you have can be overwhelming. But if you can surface the right insights, as you said, what people are buying, uh, pulls, some nuanced components of a spec out to then make recommendations on what products might be most useful. All of a sudden, I go from having to troll through 100 different products to now I'm down to five. And out of those five, maybe only two are in stock. And of those two, maybe only one, you know, fulfills a secondary certification requirement that is buried in the spec. It can mean a lot of wasted time goes away. And not only can we get the bid back faster, we all know that getting a quote back to a customer faster is a winning strategy, but also it means I can get to that next quote for my next customer that much more efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, speed is definitely part of it, but I think you hit it right on the head. Is like I think the real value is providing essentially a better quality quote to the customer, right? And like by that, agent or distributor having all of that data at their fingertips, right? Like they're able to hopefully make a better recommendation, right, for that project. Because it is, if it's challenging to present in an interface, it's also challenging for a human quoter to keep all of these different sort of factors, right, in their head around like, oh, well, what is that specifier approved before? What does that contractor like to buy? What's commonly specified in that area, right? What meets the lead time? Like our goal is to just surface that information in a way that makes it intuitive or easy for the quoter to really filter down to what's important to them or what they think is most important for that project. So think of it as like a decision assist tool during the product selection phase.
Well, and you made me think about, so we see a lot of bids from distributors, and often right next to the brand you'll have or equivalent. Yet someone went through the process to build out that brand into the bid, and potentially had they worked through it differently, they wouldn't have even arrived at putting that particular brand in the bid. And it sounds like a system like this can definitely help avoid some of that extra back and forth, extra time, and potentially quoting of the wrong product up front, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it maybe, I mean, ideally, hopefully lets you be a little bit more of a partner earlier in the process, right? Because it ultimately lowers the barrier of like providing options or feedback, like even during the design phase. And so a lot of our customers like it because it allows them to get further upstream, right? And provide like a design assist or design consult during that process because it's not quite as time intensive, right? To provide that feedback, kind of leveraging the technology to iterate earlier in the process than you otherwise might get involved.
Absolutely. So so we dove right into a lot of the technical pieces, which I love, and I love it because as you and I have spent time on what Parspec does, it's clearly a very valuable platform. But I just to take a step back, what are you in the team hearing on your end in terms of for distributors, the biggest pain points across the board, be it related to the solutions you're creating or otherwise, what are you hearing and, what are you seeing, and just interested, from your vantage point.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of divide that into two categories, right? I mean, one is the bidding phase that we've been discussing, and then the second is project management, and kind of all the post sales activities. And just on the bidding phase, I think it is, feeling a little bit reactionary, right? Of not being empowered to make selections because they don't have the data at their fingertips. We often hear that they're not able to quote all the jobs that they would like, and so they're prioritizing maybe the larger projects or projects where with contractors they're most likely to win. So a lot of the larger distributors are letting sort of some of the smaller jobs slip through the cracks just because they can't get to them. And then I would guess the third one is around decision making for quoting. A lot of our customers prior to using Parspec were kind of struggling to understand what meets the spec, but also what's in inventory, so they can essentially quote more from stock, which has a lead time and a margin benefit. I think those are probably the headlines. I mean, one more to mention is training up new employees as quoters and project managers, which
It's tough.
I completely understand why, because I mean, they're very complex products and like the range of products that are in the market. I mean, I think just for lighting alone, I think there's something like over 400 different product families. We're not talking about 4 million different families, not even considering SKUs. So you can imagine just the amount of time it takes someone to really get familiar with the industry and the market, is a challenge. So like time to being fully productive for a new employee.
And that's an area I've always wondered about, actually, because I know in our space, so we sell lights, commercial, industrial, sports lights. We sell um, industrial and commercial ceiling fans, and we sell light and utility poles. That alone, those are three very distinct areas which you need to learn a lot about to be able to effectively sell them. But when you're talking a distributor, I mean, there are endless number of lines that they could sell that are all core to their business. And I mean, I've always wondered, like, how could anyone learn 100,000 products or 500,000 different products? There's no way. You can know what you sell, but there's no way you can get down to all those products. And I would think that with everything that's coming, as you've already built out in the platform with AI, there's a real solution to help solve for that problem.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting on a really interesting point. I mean, I think that technology can definitely help, right? I don't think it'll get us like all the way there where you'll be like an instant expert in those products. And that's, I think, really why bringing the entire supply chain in is important, right? Like, the agents, they're representing a smaller line of products. They generally have much deeper technical expertise in those lines, right? And obviously, the manufacturer is the ultimate expert in those products. And so, kind of where we're going with the company is like trying to bring those parties a little bit closer together and enable better collaboration, right, during all of those phases. And so, yes, I mean, technology can help, I guess, point you in the right direction or get you in the ballpark, right? But then it's, well, how do you enable better collaboration between the parties to really, answer some of the deeper technical questions or make some of those decisions? I think there's a real opportunity there to just provide a platform that enables that collaboration in a little bit more seamless of a fashion.
It's not necessarily that we're trying to. I think of the Matrix, like, uploading the new skill set. It's not, you're not just automatically going to have the expertise due to AI, but um, AI assisted can help us get there faster. And it can do it in a couple ways. One, by consolidating the information. Two, by enabling more streamlined communication, back and forth between the manufacturers and the distributors. And I think on our end, we see that a lot more today, actually, than we used to, where distributors are more willing, it seems, to come in and ask strategic questions up front versus in the past, they might have waited until they know the deal is done and then come and ask a question. But then the answers to that question might scuttle the deal if we didn't know about it up front. In our business, it could more often than not be the difference of, well, they didn't know the project was high voltage versus standard voltage. And high voltage ends up being $500 more a unit for a certain specialty light. And now the budget is blown out completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't really discussed like the post sales bit, right? And I know you have some contractors in the audience of this podcast. And one thing we've heard is like that collaboration between the distributor and the contractor, right, around tracking uh, lead time and order status and delivery. I know that's been a pain point. And having been on the contractor side, matching labor to materials and making sure that's seamless is like one of the biggest risks of being a builder. And I think there's a real opportunity to provide better data ultimately to the contractor around order status because I mean many manufacturers have a portal or EDI or some way in which they're communicating that to the channel. But just the technology, it's been difficult to say map items in the BOM to make that seamless so that the contractor can actually stay up to date. And that's another area that I think modern integration tools, but in particular like AI and mapping, like the manufacturer's representation of the data to how the distributor or the contractor thinks about it. It's very good at making those associations. And so we do see a real opportunity to just provide better visibility on material tracking to both distributor and contractor and to take a lot of the manual work that has traditionally gone into sort of staying up to date on where shipments are. Yeah, so that's something we're really excited about that we're building towards the second half of this year.
So it sounds like the system is really moving towards being a full cycle system from early on in the process through completed order and in tracking the fulfillment.
Yeah, we're really focused on the project side of the business, but yeah, for that scope end to end, right, from bid through delivery of material on site.
Hmm. Interesting. So, certainly a very timely topic for everyone the past couple of months, tariffs. So we first experienced it a few years ago. So anyone who's been around for a few years has a little bit of experience under their belt, uh, but not like how we've seen it the past how many months now? Past 8 months or so. We on our end we hear about it from all sides. From we see it on the manufacturer side, we see it on the distributors, the contractors, even hearing about some from end users as well. But you know, very interested what you're seeing from more a technology vantage point uh, versus from the vent gate of our our sales team's phone lines. What's changed, if anything, in sort of the data that you're seeing and how people are thinking about products and thinking about how and where they source from.
Yeah, great question. And yeah, it's definitely been a dynamic regulatory environment there. So where we've seen the most impact there is, the product finder application. We're extracting some of the like typical technical attributes per category, right? But then also there's an open field where the user can specify just natural language information about what they're searching for. And so obviously with the tariff landscape, we've seen like a huge influx of searches around U.S. made and U.S. certified, right? As both distributors and contractors are looking to kind of rejigger their supply chain as regulations change, and so that's probably the biggest impact that we've seen it. It's, I mean, we don't have a graphic up right now, but just to see in relation to like when those tariffs go into effect and then activity on the platform related to those kind of keyword searches. I mean, it's a very clear correlation, right? As people are like looking for other alternatives.
And from your vantage, is that related to changing buyer behavior, or is it more correlated to pricing pressures on the supply chain?
I think it's pricing pressures primarily, right? Where the product that they had intended on is suddenly 25% more expensive. And at minimum, they're just curious to see, what else is out there that may meet those requirements that doesn't have that premium associated with it.
So
Um,
it's
a lot of exploration. Like if you look at how many times they're searching for alternatives, like say that are U.S. made versus actually selecting them and adding them into the quote. Oftentimes, I think it's just most of the searches are just looking to see, oh, is there another option, right? And then that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to switch up what they intended, but definitely a lot of curiosity and exploration there.
so somewhat similar on our side. We manufacture our steel poles overseas. We manufacture our composite poles right here in the US in Texas. Since tariffs, our quotes in inquiries around the fiberglass composite poles have been way up. A lot of interest, pricing's great on them. Yet we're still selling more steel poles that are being imported, from a facility outside the country that we have. But I would see that dynamic changing just because those prices from overseas, as long as the tariffs exist, will keep going up. I think one of the components of it is steel is such a type of product that people are used to buying for light poles or for utility poles. It's hard to move away from what even as the price starts to move until you hit that inflection point. And there's the inflection point where you start scratching your head, is there another option out there? And then there's the inflection point where you actually start changing the buying behavior. And I would say we're probably starting to get pretty close to that now.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, and it is, it's an investment, right? When you look at, first educating the channel of new product offerings and then ultimately educating the customer. And just personally, one of the things I'm excited about the role technology can play is just making that easier, right? Making it easy to discover product offerings. And that doesn't mean necessarily like from a different manufacturer, but just even as manufacturers are innovating, right? And they want to make the channel or the end customer aware of new product offerings, like allowing that to be searchable so that they can see those offerings, I think is exciting, right? It ultimately pushes the pace of innovation within the construction industry, which is something I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and you had said something to me that really, really resonated, when we were talking ahead of the show, and that was that you're really, as a team, trying to build the fabric to help manufacturers and distributors work together more effectively. And I think it's just such a great way to put it, because you need both to succeed in order for the system to work.
Yeah, really fundamental to our philosophy, right, is I think every player in the supply chain has a unique value, right? But the tools in which they're collaborating make communication challenging. I mean, my view is one of the reasons technology has been slow to penetrate into construction has not been because like practitioners are find it difficult to adopt new technology. I actually think construction people in general are pretty resourceful and used to trying new things. I think the technology just hasn't been very good at dealing with the project oriented nature in which there's like different parties interacting on different projects, and like ultimately people are migrating down to a lowest common denominator in terms of exchanging information, just because there's varying degrees of technical sophistication, which ends up being PDFs and spreadsheets, right? And like previously, it's been really hard for technology to deal with that unstructured sort of information exchange. And that's something AI is quite good at extracting. So I actually do believe that this latest sort of fundamental technology shift with AI is going to bring like a host of really exciting tools to construction because it's able to reason with those documents in a way that previous technology hasn't been able to.
So probably in the past, a team would have hired an analyst to come in, and they would have sat down in a room with no windows, with this big stack of all the papers from the past 2 years of bids and quotes and POs, and gone through all the data manually. So, I mean, this is probably more of a broad question for you, but from your vantage, being an AI first and AI native platform, what do these changes coming with AI mean for the labor force from your vantage point?
I mean, I think we've seen major technological shifts a couple of times, I guess, in my career, right? I remember when sort of BIM was first taking hold, and there's a lot of concern in the drafting community of like, oh, what is that going to mean for drawing production and drafting, and like what's going to happen to all these jobs? And of course, we haven't seen any real reduction in terms of drafting. Those people have just become proficient at using BIM and using computer-based drafting, and it's actually made people more productive and improve coordination. And I kind of see AI in a similar way as like it's going to take care of some of the blocking and tackling and enable sort of practitioners to do higher order thinking around synthesizing all the different data, making better decisions instead of spending their time like wrangling information from a drawing set into a quote. Like that all is going to be automated, and they're going to be like, well, how do I provide good options to my customer? Like spending a little bit more time figuring out exactly what's required. And like ultimately, I think that's a good thing. So to directly answer your question, I don't think it's going to mean a fundamental shift in terms of the number of quoters and project managers, like, or in general, right? That practitioners working in the industry. I think it's going to increase the capabilities of what those folks are able to accomplish in their day.
Right, really, really more enabling them to be more effective. It's not as much AI replacement as it will be for those who are willing to, learn how to use such systems, that the AI enablement will be there to help them be more effective, sell more efficiently, um, internally be more efficient with operations, and more effective in interacting with customers.
Yeah, I mean, as those tools become more commonplace, I do think the expectation of the end customer is going to rise, right? They're going to get used to getting responses quicker. They're going to be used to higher quality deliverables. And so I would say there is pressure, right, to adopt the tools just to I mean, we're still in the early phases, I guess, generally across the industry, but as these tools become more adopted, there will be a pressure just to like keep pace that you're using the latest and greatest tools.
And
But
there's
that'll
good
be,
and bad out there. There are
yeah,
definitely good and bad.
yeah. But I don't think that'll affect the labor force. It may affect what companies thrive and what what companies struggle, right? But I think that the labor force within those companies will be pretty stable.
Good, good. And so in
We'll see
terms
in
of,
5 years, so you can pull this
well,
podcast up and
we we heard it here first from
yeah.
we heard it here first from Forrest. So with AI, I mean, in our company, we've been very active in testing out new functionality, seeing how we can use things to move faster and more effectively. I think what we've come to see is there's really two main cohorts we've come across. Well, really three. There's the first one are systems or companies that input the word AI so that they can stay relevant. There's then a second group we've seen where they're really at the infancy of trying to integrate AI technologies to their system to try to support customers, but maybe this is just, the first beta version, or they felt a need to get something out on the market so that they weren't left behind. And then the third group we're seeing are really the ones who have taken a more AI native approach, where they've spent the time to really build out something that is not just a buzzword, but is really useful for their customers. Be it if we're talking marketing software or quoting software or anything in the middle. And just interested, because you're being in the space, you're seeing a lot of this. I mean, does that jive with what you're seeing as well? And it might also be useful if you have any thoughts for the audience on, how do you identify when you're searching for software? What is something that's really actually going to be beneficial in terms of AI versus it's just marketing speak?
Yeah, well, a lot of great questions in there. I guess I'll start with sort of the different, maybe back up one step. AI, I mean, for those that have used any of the LLMs or like, I think there's no doubt that it fundamentally changes the way that like we interact with software, right? And so because that change in interaction, or at least the potential for new interactions, is so pronounced, software that has been designed and developed with those capabilities in mind, like will have a different look and feel, right? It's like it's like when web first came on and there were cloud-based applications as opposed to desktop, like those applications that were architected in a different paradigm have a choice, right? They're either going to like re-architect their entire systems, or they're going to like add small features and functionality, but not fundamentally change the way the interface is. I mean, I think you'll see that flavor, right? Because not all software companies will choose to fundamentally re-architect in an AI native way. I mean, our timing was a bit interesting, and we were founded in 2021, just as this was, I think, starting to take off. And so we were actually building some of the infrastructure around crawling and developing that right as LLMs first started to really captivate attention. And so I think we were fortunate in that case, and that like the system got architected in a way that is, I guess what you would call AI native, right? It's like using those fundamental interfaces. That doesn't mean that one is, I mean, there's bad software on both sides in terms of the value delivered, but just the way that the way that we interact with it, I think is different depending on whether you're AI native or not. So then your second question is like, how do you know what software is good or not in terms of AI?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah. I'd say, how do you know it's really smoke and mirrors versus a system where AI truly can really, help you in the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most AI applications, a nice thing about it is there doesn't tend to be like a huge implementation cost to try these systems, right? And so, we always advise our customers, like, we try to steer them and like, hey, let's do a pilot. Let's pick some clearly defined business objectives that you want to achieve. And let's get this basically the smallest meaningful group to prove that business hypothesis. And so the idea here, and I think this holds across applications, is like give a lot of thought to what is like a proof of concept to see if your business is really getting value out of an AI tool, and like before you scale any sort of deployment. It seems obvious, but I do think it takes a bit of consideration to really design pilots in an effective way to really see that they're going to deliver the value that you hope that they would. So that's one point. The other point is this technology, as we all know, if we've used these tools, like, is changing quite rapidly. So, you could use something and 6 months later, like, it's fundamentally different in terms of its capabilities. And so it is a bit dizzying to keep up to date on, like, what are all the different tools that are out there. And so that's another reason to, like, get very efficient at piloting it, right? Because you're going to want to try. I mean, I think it's just the age in which there's a lot of different options out there. Some are going to work, some are not. And if you're really trying to be on the cutting edge there, you have to develop a pretty strong program to try new things and see what's really working for your business. So anyway, couple pointers there just from having deployed a lot of this over the past couple of years.
And I think another piece from having seen your platform, it's also important just to remember that there's a lot of potential customers out there for any software company who maybe are just getting started with AI. And so, I think systems that are built out in a way where you allow the users to make use of it, but if they're not overly proficient from day one, it's not going to hinder them from recognizing the benefit from going digital where maybe they were using pen, paper, and notebooks before. That becomes really important too. And in the ones who are doing that and don't get too caught up in, if you don't know AI and you're not coming in to use AI this moment and only use AI, you're missing the boat. I mean, they're missing the boat in my opinion, because if you look, our industry isn't there. Maybe software companies working with software companies are different, but at the end of the day, our contractors, our distributors, our specifiers, they've done something that has worked well for a long time. And so when we're looking to, or when they're looking to go and add software to their workflow, even just that first step of doing it with the AI aside is still going to be super valuable to them. And so then if they can get step one and okay, now we'll step two, I can start using all this new functionality that can really help me excel it even faster. That's the workflow, or that's the process, the ramp up that I've, seen that seems to work really, really well.
Yeah, and I mean, a couple of industry associations have done surveys on, like, adoption of AI and AEC and other industries, and the gist of it is, the majority of people in AEC are using AI on a daily basis, at least according to the surveys. But the numbers that are using domain specific or industry specific tools is something like 10%, right? So, like, the majority of usage is still generalist tools like, GPT or Gemini or some of the. And so I think we're just starting to see, like, a generation of, like, industry specific tools that are handling, like, a broader piece of the workflow instead of generalist tools that people are leveraging to do certain tasks, right? And so I think that will also help, because it is a bit jarring, right, to stay up to date and try 3 or 4 different tools if you have a complex workflow, right? I think you'll start to see technology providers, like, developing applications that are more industry specific, that can allow you to leverage this in a little bit more seamless of a way.
Well, it's funny. We have live chat on our website, and more we've been seeing prospects and customers coming on asking, are you AI? Now we have a team that sits on live chat. And at first I remember the team lead had come to me and had asked, what should we say? It's like,
Yeah.
well, you're a real person. Just tell them you're a real person.
Yeah.
And so the funniest thing, there have been a few times now, as people know AI is getting good, where they've sent chats out to the rest of the team to see, and they'll say, well, I'm a real person. And they'll put like a smiley face or a thumbs up, whatever. And the person will come back and say, prove it.
Yeah.
And our business development person's head just started spinning like, how do I prove it? I'm on chat. What am I supposed to do? There's a picture of them already there. So now they think the picture's fake, that the text is synthetic. But it's a whole new world now. And so
Just don't give out any social security numbers for the
yeah,
customer support.
yeah. Here's my bank account number.
Yeah.
Here's my social and my address if you want to send flowers. But but good. Well, Forrest, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It was great to talk to you about the platform and what you're seeing in the industry. And uh, for anyone who is interested in learning more about Parspec, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can go to our website. It's Parspec, Parspec.io. And if you're interested in contacting me directly, it's just my first name, Forrest, at Parspec.io. So welcome anybody that wants to continue the conversation.
Perfect. Thanks so
Thanks
much,
very much
Forrest.
for having me, Cory.